Get the hell off the road before you get yourself killed! Officer Grant Turner slammed the brakes just in time. His cruiser screeched to a halt, tires skidding across the icy asphalt, headlights casting sharp beams into the snowy haze. Standing, directly in the center of the two-lane mountain road, a large German shepherd held his ground, eyes locked on the vehicle, breath fogging in the freezing air. He didn't flinch, didn't back away. He just stared, rigid and unshaken, as if daring the car to move another inch. Grant cursed under his breath and killed the engine. What kind of idiot dog plays chicken in the middle of nowhere? He opened the door, boots crunching into packed snow as he stepped into the cold. The wind bit at his face, but his focus didn't leave the dog. The shepherd was in good shape. Thick coat, strong legs, no limp, no signs of distress. Not a stray, not injured. But something about the dog's eyes made Grant's instincts prickle. They weren't wild or confused. They were pleading, urgent. The dog barked once, sharp and deep, then turned and sprinted off the road into the tree line. "You've got to be kidding me," Grant muttered. His patrol route hadn't included chasing dogs through a forest in a snowstorm. He was already behind on his shift, and radio traffic was backed up from a pileup on the interstate. But as he watched the shepherd pause at the edge of the trees, glancing back, barking again, then running deeper into the woods, something pulled at him. He radioed dispatch. Unit 42, making an unscheduled stop near mile 14 on Hollow Pine. Pass. Possible injured animal or something. I'll check it out on foot. Copy that, 42. You need backup? Grant hesitated. I'll let you know. He zipped up his coat and followed the trail, boots crunching through icy underbrush. The forest was dense, pine branches heavy with snow, the light dimming fast as the clouds thickened overhead. He kept his flashlight low, scanning for movement. The dog stayed ahead, not fleeing, just leading, always just far enough to be seen, then stopping to wait. After 10 minutes of climbing through uneven terrain, Grant spotted it, a vehicle, half buried in a ditch, nose down and rear twisted against a fallen log. The windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks, the driver's side door hanging open, no tire tracks leading in, just a rough path through the brush, as if the car had been pushed off the road on purpose. Grant quickened his pace. "Hello? Anyone in there?" No answer. The shepherd circled the vehicle, barking frantically now. Grant approached, his flashlight cutting through the gloom, and what he saw made his stomach drop. Inside, crumpled against the passenger seat, was a young woman, late 20s maybe, her face pale, a thin trail of blood drying along her temple. She wasn't moving. He reached in, checked her pulse, faint. But there. "Hey," he said, tapping her cheek gently. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't speak. Her hands were icy. Whoever she was, she'd been here for hours, maybe more. Grant grabbed his radio. "Dispatch. I need medics to my coordinates. Female found unconscious in a wrecked sedan. Still breathing, possibly hypothermic." The dispatcher responded quickly, voice tight with urgency. "ETA 15 minutes. Hang tight." As Grant stepped back to reassess the scene, the dog let out a low growl. Not at him, but toward the edge of the trees behind them. Grant turned his light and caught a flicker of movement. A man bundled in a heavy coat slipping between trees, watching. "Hey!" Grant shouted. "You! Stop!" The figure disappeared instantly. Grant reached for his sidearm, heart pounding. He knew that look. That wasn't a hiker or a bystander. That was someone fleeing. He turned back to the dog, who now stood between him and the vehicle, protective, watching the same tree line. "Is that who did this?" Grant asked, barely above a whisper. The shepherd didn't move, but his silence said everything. This dog hadn't just stumbled onto an accident. He had been guarding it, staying, waiting, and when help didn't come fast enough, he ran into the road to find it. Grant knelt beside him, staring into those dark, intelligent eyes. "You're not just some dog, are you?" And in that moment, the snow seemed to quiet, as if even the wind was waiting for the truth to unfold. The sound of approaching sirens echoed faintly through the forest, distant, but growing louder. Officer Grant Turner stayed low beside the wreck, one hand resting on the icy metal frame of the car, the other gripping his flashlight tightly. The snow had picked up again, falling in thick, silent sheets, coating the scene in white, as if trying to bury the evidence before help could arrive. But Grant couldn't take his eyes off the tree line where the figure had vanished. That wasn't a coincidence. Someone had been watching the crash, possibly even caused it, and then disappeared the moment help showed up. The German Shepherd remained close, his body now positioned protectively between the car and the forest. His ears twitched with every movement, eyes fixed ahead like he knew exactly where the danger still lurked. Grant felt it too, that unnerving sense that they were being hunted instead of helped. The woman inside the vehicle moaned softly, her head shifting slightly as she tried to open her eyes. Grant turned back, kneeling beside her, brushing wet hair from her forehead. "You're okay. Don't move too much. Medics are on their way," he said gently. Her lips parted, a faint whisper escaping. "Is he gone?" Grant leaned in. "Who? The man in the woods?" She tried to nod, winced, then clutched her side. "He chased us off the road. Said we knew too much." Grant felt his stomach twist. This wasn't just an accident, it was intentional. "Who's us? Was someone else with you?" The woman opened her eyes wider now, panic setting in. "My brother, 17. He ran when we crashed. I don't know where." Before she could finish, the German Shepherd barked twice and took off toward the trees, his body slicing through the snow like a shadow. Grant stood immediately, grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, patient is conscious. Possible second victim, teenage male, fled the scene on foot after forced vehicle crash. Dog just took off into the woods. I'm following on foot." He didn't wait for a response. He sprinted after the shepherd, his boots pounding the snow-covered ground, flashlight bouncing with each stride. Branches whipped at his arms. The cold air clawed at his lungs. But the dog didn't slow. They moved deeper into the woods, the trees growing closer, the silence thicker. Then the barking stopped, replaced by a low whine. Grant followed the sound until he came to a fallen log near a slope, and there, huddled beneath a thick branch, was a teenage boy. His arm was bloodied, and his face was pale with shock, but he was breathing. The dog sat beside him, licking his hand gently. Grant dropped to his knees. "You're okay now. I've got you." The boy looked up, dazed. "He didn't follow?" "No," Grant said, scanning the woods. "Not yet." The boy's voice cracked. "He had a gun. Said my sister and I had stolen something, but we didn't. She just found it." "What is it?" Grant asked, helping him to his feet. Before the boy could answer, the dog let out another growl, low, guttural, eyes fixed behind them. Grant turned fast, raising his flashlight, and saw the same man. From before, this time much closer, half hidden behind a tree. He held something metallic in one hand, and his face was smeared with snow and sweat. He didn't look like a thief. He looked like a man on the edge of panic. "You're trespassing on something you don't understand," the man hissed. Grant moved in front of the boy and the dog. "Back away now. You're armed, and you're being recorded. Put it down." The man didn't. He took a slow step forward, and that's when the dog lunged, not recklessly, not wildly, but with precision. He slammed into the man's leg, sending him sprawling. The weapon clattered to the ground, and before the attacker could reach it, Grant kicked it farther into the brush. "Hands where I can see them," he shouted. The man froze, staring up at the dog now standing over him, teeth bared, growling from deep in his chest. Grant cuffed him quickly, pressing his face into the snow. The attacker muttered something under his breath, words that didn't quite fit. She shouldn't have taken the drive. It wasn't for her. Back at the crash site, the EMTs had stabilized the woman. She reached out with wide eyes when she saw her brother emerge from the woods, limping but alive. The moment they saw each other, neither spoke. They just embraced, shivering and crying as the snow continued to fall. The German Shepherd walked calmly to their side and sat down between them, as if he had always belonged there. Later, after everyone had been loaded into ambulances and the attacker was taken into custody, Grant sat on the back of his cruiser, staring at the dog, who now watched him silently from a patch of flattened snow. No collar, no tag, but clearly not lost. "Where did you come from?" Grant asked softly. The dog tilted his head. One of the paramedics walked over. "The woman said the dog showed up out of nowhere 2 days ago. She thinks he was tracking them, that he sensed something was wrong." Grant looked down the road, toward the trees. He didn't just sense it, he knew. The paramedic smiled. "So what now? He yours?" Grant looked back at the dog, who was now following the ambulance with his eyes, ears perked. "Not ready to leave yet. Not until he was sure they were safe." "Not mine," Grant said quietly. "He already belongs to someone. They just haven't met him yet." And for the first time that day, the dog wagged his tail, just once, and then sat down again, watching the road like a guardian waiting for his next call. The hospital was quiet, far too quiet for what had just happened. Officer Grant Turner leaned against the cold tile wall of the emergency waiting area, still soaked from the snow, boots dripping slush onto the floor. Across from him, the teenage boy sat wrapped in a thick blanket, his eyes glassy, his arm now bandaged and resting in a sling. His sister remained unconscious in ICU, the medical team still running scans to rule out internal bleeding, but her vitals were stable, alive at least, and it was all because of the dog, who now lay curled up on the floor outside her room like a soldier guarding a fallen comrade. No one had come forward to claim him. Animal control hadn't been called, not by Grant at least. He couldn't bring himself to treat the shepherd like a lost pet. The dog had done something that men 3 times his size and with a badge couldn't. He'd tracked, protected, and waited. There was something deeper in his behavior, intention, memory, purpose. But Grant couldn't shake what the boy had said in the woods. She found it. The attacker hadn't wanted the woman or the car. He wanted what she had with her. Something, she found. Something dangerous enough to silence them. Grant walked over and sat next to the boy again. "You said your sister found something. Do you know what it was?" The kid hesitated, lips tight, hands fidgeting in his lap. Then he glanced toward the hallway where the shepherd lay. "She was hiking," he said finally. "Last week. Up near the cliffs past Marlow Ridge. That's where she found the flash drive." Grant narrowed his eyes. "Just lying on the ground?" "In the snow," the boy replied. "Wrapped in a plastic bag, tucked into a hollowed tree. It was weird. But she thought someone lost it, so she brought it home." Grant leaned forward. "And what was on it?" The boy hesitated. "I don't know. She plugged it into her laptop. Just looked like a bunch of numbers. And one video file. I didn't see it, but she said it gave her chills." Grant's gut twisted. "Was the man who ran you off the road looking for that drive?" The boy nodded slowly. "He showed up 2 days later. Said he was from public safety enforcement. Had some badge, but he didn't feel right. My sister knew something was off. She lied. Said we didn't have it. That's when we decided to leave town." Grant stood pacing now. "Do you still have the drive?" The boy's eyes flickered with fear. "It's in her backpack, in the car." Grant didn't wait. He left the boy with a nurse, flashed his badge, and headed down to the hospital parking lot where the wrecked vehicle had been towed. It was now sitting in the impound garage, snow still crusted around the wheels. The front end was mangled, glass everywhere, but the back door still opened with effort. He found the backpack jammed under the passenger seat, partially torn, soaked through, but zipped shut. Inside, along with an inhaler, a notebook, and a broken phone charger was a small waterproof case. Grant pried it open and stared down at the flash drive resting inside. Black, unmarked, clean. He slipped it into his coat pocket, locked the vehicle, and headed back upstairs. As he re-entered the hospital corridor, the shepherd stood up immediately. Not tense, not panicked, just alert. His eyes tracked Grant's hand as it touched his jacket. The dog stepped forward, sniffed once, and then, strangely, sat back down, like he recognized it. Grant stared at him. "You've seen this before, haven't you?" The dog blinked slowly, as if answering without sound. He sat in an empty consultation room, plugged the drive into a department-issued laptop, and opened the only video file on it. The screen flickered to life, grainy footage, time-stamped from 2 weeks earlier. It showed a dark room, surgical tables, stainless steel walls. A man, face blurred, spoke off camera. The voice was mechanical, distorted. He pointed to a restrained dog on the table. K9 unit, retired. Originally trained for search and trauma. Subject is receiving Phase 3 implants. Neural override protocol begins in T-10 minutes. Grant watched in stunned silence as the dog in the video twitched violently under the restraints, its eyes wide with panic, struggling against the straps. A second man leaned over with a long syringe, injecting something directly into the base of the animal's skull. The file ended there. Grant sat back, chest tight. This wasn't just animal abuse. This was military-grade experimentation, unauthorized, cruel, and completely off the books. And someone was trying to erase every trace of it. No wonder they had gone after the woman, and now they'd come after a boy, and a dog who had probably escaped from that very same facility. Grant closed the laptop and looked out the window. The snow had stopped falling. The sky was clearing, but something darker was just beginning. The door creaked open behind him. The teenage boy stepped in, holding something in his hand, a faded ID tag. He handed it to Grant wordlessly. The tag read, Milo, K917. Grant looked down the hall. The shepherd sat at attention, staring at them both. Now they had a name, and Milo wasn't done fighting. Grant didn't sleep that night. Even after the woman stabilized, even after the boy was moved to a private recovery room under hospital watch, even after Milo curled up beside the bed and finally let himself close his eyes, Grant sat alone in the dim break room, the flash drive, clutched in his hand. The images from the video looped endlessly in his mind. Restrained dogs, invasive procedures, the cold, surgical detachment of the men behind the camera. It wasn't just disturbing, it was inhuman, and it had government fingerprints all over it, yet buried so deeply no official channel would acknowledge it. He ran the drive through a secure channel linked to a federal contact he trusted, a former K-9 handler who'd been forced into early retirement after his own unit went missing under classified reassignment. The call had been short, just a few words. "You've stumbled into something real, and they'll burn the whole state down to keep it quiet." By sunrise, Grant knew what he had to do. He found Milo in the boy's room, wide awake again, standing beside the window like he was still on duty. The boy, Daniel, was asleep, but his breathing was calmer, steadier. His sister was still sedated but stable. They were safe for now. Grant knelt beside the dog. "I need your help," he whispered. "One more run." Milo looked at him. No bark, no tail wag. Just that steady, intense gaze that said more than words could. They left the hospital before dawn under cover of a weather advisory that had shut down most inbound traffic. Grant had called in a temporary leave. No questions asked. He had also left a letter in the chief's inbox with a simple message. "If anything happens to me, start with Marlow Ridge." The snow had begun to melt along the lower hills, but up where they were headed, toward the cliffs past the ridge where Daniel said his sister had found the flash drive. Ice still covered the trees in crystal sheets, and fog clung low to the valley floor. The path wasn't easy, but Milo led without hesitation, tracing something invisible through the woods, pausing every so often to sniff the ground, ears twitching. An hour into the hike, they reached a clearing. A tall pine tree stood near the cliff's edge, and at its base, half covered in moss and ice, was the hollow that matched the boy's description. Grant knelt and reached inside. Nothing. Whatever was left had been taken, likely the same day the woman found the drive. But as he looked closer, he noticed something else. Faint tracks, not animal. Boots, fresh ones. He stood up fast, eyes scanning the tree line. Milo stiffened, his head snapping left. A figure stepped out of the fog, not armed, not dressed in. Black like the others, but wearing a parka and a ranger's badge. His hands were up. "Easy," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." Grant didn't lower his hand from his holster. "Then say what you came to say, fast." The man approached slowly. "Name's Ellis. I used to be with wildlife enforcement, but I got reassigned. After I started asking questions about missing K-9s from military surplus." He glanced at Milo. "That one. He's the reason I started digging." Grant's voice was cold. "You know what happened to him?" Ellis nodded. "They called it Project Veil. They were reprogramming dogs who were too loyal to their handlers, trying to make them obedient to anyone who held a controller. The results were unstable." Grant clenched his jaw. "So they dumped the ones who didn't comply?" "Worse," Ellis said. "They erased them. Dogs, files, handlers, everything. But a few escaped. Milo was one of them. The girl, she picked up the wrong flash drive. That wasn't an accident. That was bait. Left behind when they pulled out." "Bait for who?" "Anyone looking too closely." Before Grant could respond, Milo growled. A rustle came from the slope below. 3 men emerged, dressed in civilian gear but moving like trained operators. One of them held a radio to his mouth. Target confirmed. "Dog is here. Officer Turner, too," Ellis whispered. "They must have been following me. I didn't know." They were this close. Grant reached into his coat and pulled out the drive. "You want this?" he called out, stepping toward the edge of the cliff. "Then come take it." One of the men raised a weapon. Milo leapt before he could aim, knocking him sideways with terrifying speed. The gun fired once into the air, but the dog had already turned, sprinting back to cover. The other two advanced. Grant fired a warning shot into the ground. Ellis shouted, "Get to the ridge! There's an old fire cabin just up the trail. We can upload the drive from there. It has satellite access." They ran. Milo stayed ahead, clearing the path, always checking behind to make sure they were still close. Bullets cracked through the trees. Grant fired back when necessary, never to kill, just enough to slow them. By the time they reached the fire cabin, their legs were numb and lungs raw from cold air. Ellis sealed the door while Grant booted the terminal. The screen blinked alive. He jammed the flash drive into the port and initiated the upload. They won't be able to stop it, Ellis said. Once it hits the satellite, it's going straight to 4 independent servers, whistleblower channels, encryption keys, everything. Outside, the gunfire stopped. Silence fell. Milo stood at the door, staring out. Then, as if satisfied, he turned and lay down near the terminal. His body was still tense, but his breathing slowed. Grant sat down beside him, hand resting on his back. You did it, buddy. It's over. Ellis exhaled. Not over, but it's out now. They can't bury it again. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the upload completing. The truth was free now, and Milo, once discarded, once hunted, was no longer just a tool or a target. He was the one who saved them all. The sun had broken through the clouds by the time the transfer completed. A thin golden light filtered through the cracked window panes of the fire cabin, resting gently on Milo's fur as he lay curled beneath the desk, chest rising and falling in slow, even breaths. Officer Grant Turner leaned back in the wooden chair, his eyes fixed on the screen as the final status bar turned green. The encrypted drive had uploaded successfully to all 4 target locations. There was no turning back now. The footage, the files, the names, everything about Project Veil was no longer a secret guarded in shadows. It was out in the world, undeniable, unstoppable. Ellis stood near the window, binoculars in hand, watching the tree line beyond the ridge. They've backed off, he said. Whoever was tracking us, they're not coming this way. Not anymore. Grant nodded, but his focus remained on the dog. Milo had done more than any badge or uniform could have. He had risked everything, defied his conditioning, and led them step by step through something no one else could have survived. There were no medals for dogs like, "You think they'll come after him again?" Grant asked quietly. Ellis sighed. They might, but now that the program's exposed, they'll be too busy trying to explain how it existed in the first place. Once the media gets it, the whole thing goes public. And Milo, he's no longer a threat. He's a hero. Grant stood, stretching his aching back. He walked to Milo and knelt down, running his hand gently along the shepherd's back. Milo opened his eyes, tired but alert. There was still a faint tenseness in his frame, like he wasn't ready to believe it was truly over. "Hey," Grant whispered. "You made it. You kept them safe. You found the truth. You did what no one else could." Milo blinked once, then let out a soft breath and pressed his head into Grant's hand. Back in town, the news spread fast. By nightfall, major networks had begun airing pieces of the leaked video. Animal rights groups called for congressional hearings. A senator from Washington released a statement demanding a full investigation into the unauthorized experiments. Whistleblowers from adjacent agencies began coming forward, and the name Project Veil started trending alongside a single image, the still frame of a German shepherd, scarred and steady, looking into the lens like he had stared down death itself and refused to blink. Grant returned to the hospital with Milo that evening. Daniel was still awake, curled on the couch beside his sister's bed. She was alert now, pale and sore but smiling faintly when they entered. The moment Milo stepped into the room, she reached out without hesitation. He walked straight to her, laid his head on the side of the bed, and closed his eyes. "I knew you'd come back," she said softly, her voice breaking just a little. Grant stayed for a while, long enough to know they were safe, then excused himself quietly. Outside the hospital, the air had warmed slightly. The snow had begun to melt, revealing the first patches of green beneath the drifts. Spring was coming, and with it, change. He took Milo home that night, not because he had to, but because there was nowhere else the dog seemed to want to go. His department offered to find a permanent handler, someone trained to work with former K9s, but Grant declined. Milo didn't need more training. He needed peace. Weeks passed. Investigations launched. Retired officers began speaking out. Facilities were shut down. Arrests were made. No one dared deny it anymore. And Milo changed. He began sleeping through the night. He no longer paced the hallway or flinched at sudden sounds. He learned the creak of Grant's porch swing, the rattle of food bowls, the quiet joy of watching birds from the window. He still patrolled the house from time to time, especially when the wind stirred too hard at night. But now he always returned to his bed where a blanket waited, and dreams could unfold without fear. One day, as Grant stood on the porch with his coffee, he felt a weight settle beside him. Milo sat down, shoulder brushing against his leg, eyes scanning the horizon as if it were a scene he finally recognized. Familiar, Safe. You're not just a dog, Grant said quietly, more to himself than anyone. You're a survivor. Milo didn't move. He didn't have to, because everything that needed to be said had already happened. In the snow, in the silence, in the way he had stood between darkness and a child without hesitation. And now, at last, there was nothing left. To guard, only the peace they'd earned together, and the quiet promise of tomorrow.